Hey, it's Kai. You know those massive SQL queries that look like tangled spaghetti? They're hard to read and even harder to fix. In this lesson, I'm going to show you a simple tool called a CTE or Common Table Expression. It lets you name temporary steps right before the final result. So here's the technical definition, but don't panic. A CTE is just a named temporary table you define inside your main SQL query. It disappears immediately after the query runs. Think of it like naming a step in a recipe so you can reference it later without writing everything down again. Here's the trick to visualize this. Imagine making a fancy dinner. You don't chop all ingredients while the soup is boiling. You set aside chopped onions in a labeled bowl, then cooked carrots in another bowl. That labeled bowl of onions, that's your CTE. You prep it once, then use it cleanly in the final recipe. Look at this code. We start with the word which is our signal that a new helper is coming up. Inside the parentheses, we define what goes into our temporary table called employee names. Finally, we select from that name just like any other table. You might have used nested subqueries before, but those often look like Russian dolls that are hard to open. With a CTE, we pull the complex logic out into a named step. This makes it easier to debug because you can sort or filter the intermediate data right there. Now we get into the real power move, recursion. Imagine an org chart where you need to find every manager under a boss. A recursive CTE starts with one person and keeps adding their reports until there are no more levels left. It handles infinite growth safely without crashing. But be very careful here. If you forget to stop the recursion, your database will spin until you manually cancel it. You must ensure the loop has a clear condition where no more matches are found. In short, always verify your recursive CTE has an exit strategy. So which should you use? For one-off calculations, a CTE is faster and keeps your script tidy. A temporary table stays around longer and needs extra setup commands. I personally prefer CTEs for readability unless the dataset is huge and needs physical storage. Here's my honest opinion. Don't force a CTE onto every single query. If your join is straightforward and involves only 3 tables, write it directly. Over-engineering with a CTE can sometimes make the query harder for others to understand than just using standard joins. These mistakes trip up beginners all the time. You must remember to put a semicolon after the entire with statement if you are running it in a tool that requires it. Also, never name your CTE using reserved SQL keywords like order or group unless you quote them. Notice how we define our helper first and only then ask for data. You cannot refer to the main source table inside your own CTE definition without creating circular references that crash the parser. The flow must always be definition then usage. Finally, a word on performance. Sometimes a CTE actually forces the database to do more work than a standard subquery. You should test execution plans to see if the optimizer handles it efficiently or if you need to switch strategies. Let's recap what we built today. A CTE lets you define temporary named result sets that exist only for a single statement. They are essential for transforming complex queries into readable blocks of logic. In short, use them to break down big problems into small, manageable pieces. Small channel, honest ask, one like, one follow. That's it.